Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are opening the black box of the corporate world. We're stepping inside the department that defines the parameters of your professional existence, arguably more than any other. We are talking about human resource management.
Right. It's the function everyone interacts with, yet almost no one really analyzes structurally. It's the department that hires you, trains you, determines your pay, and if things go wrong, is the one escorting you out of the building with a cardboard box.
Exactly. And the question we're tackling today isn't just about bureaucracy or, paperwork. It's about the soul of the modern workplace. Is human resource management, or HRM, a strategic partner that aligns employee well-being with business success? Is it the engine of fairness that makes work bearable?
Or is it a sophisticated system of control, a direct descendant of scientific management designed to commodify human beings, extract maximum value, and frankly, manage liability rather than actually caring for people?
I'll be taking the position that HRM is a vital, value-adding discipline. I think it's a function rooted in the human relations movement and is absolutely essential for organizational cohesion. Without it, the modern workplace is just chaos.
And I'll be taking the view that HRM is an evolution of control systems, linking back to Taylorism and even state bureaucracy that prioritizes efficiency and risk mitigation really over the human interest.
All right, let's dive in. So, to understand where we are, we have to look at where we started. There is this cynical view, which I know you hold, that HR was invented just to police workers, but that it just ignores the history of the industrial betterment movement. If you go back to the 19th century during the height of the Industrial Revolution, you had pioneers like Robert Owen and Charles Babbage. These weren't just ruthless industrialists. They were systems thinkers. They realized that you simply cannot build a sustainable industry on the backs of broken people.
Broken people is a very telling phrase, isn't it? It implies they were already being broken by the system these men created.
Well, it acknowledges the reality of industrial labor at the time. But their conclusion was radical. The idea that perfect work requires healthy workers. This is the seed of what we now call Unitarianism in HR theory. It's the perspective that the organization is a cohesive whole, a family, you could say, where the employer and employee share a common destiny. Modern HR strives for this. It has moved way beyond just filing pinwheel forms or personnel administration. I mean, today we're talking about talent management, succession planning, diversity initiatives. It's about securing a long-term partnership based on mutual benefit.
I think Unitarianism sounds lovely in a textbook, but let's look at the actual language that defines the field. You mentioned human resource management. The term human resource, it was coined by the economist John R. Commons way back in 1893. Words matter. The moment you categorize a human being as a resource, you've made a fundamental shift in how you view that person. You're categorizing them as an input.
I think that's a semantic argument that ignores the actual practice on the ground.
But it isn't just semantics, it's the operating system of the discipline. A resource is something you use, you optimize it, you deplete it. Conceptually, in this framework, a human is really no different than a seam of coal or a stack of lumber. And this didn't come from a desire to nurture. It came straight from Frederick Winslow Taylor and scientific management in the early 20th century. Taylorism is the DNA of HR.
You're really equating modern HR, with all its focus on culture and belonging, with the guy who stood over workers with a stopwatch?
Structurally, yes. Taylorism was about separating the planning of work from the doing of work. He viewed labor purely as a principal input to be maximized for economic efficiency. The goal wasn't perfect work for the worker's sake. It was output for the owner's sake. And we see this today. We've softened the language. We call it human capital management now. But the logic is identical. It's about extracting value from an asset.
Okay, but you are stopping the history lesson right before the most important pivot. I mean, you're completely ignoring the human relations movement of the 1920s and 30s. This was the moment the science of efficiency collided with the reality of psychology. This is where the field actually found its humanity.
The realization that people have feelings?
Well, yes, but it's more than that. It's the realization that treating people like machines, it actually breaks the machine. Look at the work of C.S. Myers and the National Institute of Industrial Psychology. But specifically, look at the Hawthorne studies by Elton Mayo. This is HR 101, I know, but the takeaway is profound. They changed the lighting in a factory to see if workers would be more productive. Productivity went up. They dimmed the lights. Productivity went up again.
The famous Hawthorne effect.
Right. It wasn't the lights. It was the fact that someone was paying attention to them. It proved that social stimuli, attention, group dynamics, working conditions mattered more than just the physical environment or even the financial compensation. This is what paved the way for Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Hertzberg's motivation theories. It shifted the paradigm from control to motivation. And this is where modern HR lives, trying to unlock potential, not just enforce rules.
See, I read the history of the 1920s and I see a parallel track developing that is much, much darker and frankly, much more influential on how corporations actually run. While Mayo was playing with light bulbs, other institutions were perfecting mass control. We have to talk about the Soviet connection.
Wait, you are seriously comparing a corporate HR department to the Soviet Union?
I'm comparing the administrative structures, yes. Look at the Orgbureau, the organizational bureau established in the USSR in 1919. Its specific function was the selection, assignment, and distribution of cadre, personnel. It was a proto-HR department. It was the first time we saw a massive bureaucratic machine dedicated solely to managing the human element of an organization.
That is a massive stretch. You're conflating a totalitarian state with a business department.
Is it? Stalin famously said, "The most precious and the most decisive capital is people."
Which sounds like a validation of the human-centric view, if you take it at face value.
But context is everything. When he said that, he was talking about the mass deployment of human bodies for the 5-year plans and the Gulag system. It was the ultimate expression of the human as a resource ideology. The Orgbureau demonstrated that you can use personnel files, promotion lists, and ideological alignment to consolidate power and manage a massive workforce. My argument is that modern HR is functionally a descendant of these control systems. It monitors, it categorizes, and it enforces the ideology of the firm. It manages the cadres.
I just think that comparison completely collapses when you look at the objective. The Soviet system was about state coercion and political survival. In a democratic society, within a business, HR serves as an ethical guardian.
An ethical guardian?
Absolutely. Look at the code of ethics for the profession. Look at the actual day-to-day work of an HR professional. They are the ones tasked with advancing dignity and safety. Who ensures compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act? Who makes sure you get paid a minimum wage and overtime? Who enforces the Equal Employment Opportunity Act so that a hiring manager can't discriminate based on race, sex, or religion?
Lawyers. Lawyers ensure that. HR just fills out the paperwork to keep the lawyers away.
That's cynical and just incorrect. HR operationalizes those rights. If a mother needs to take leave under the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, she goes to HR. They protect that right against a manager who might just want her back at her desk immediately. They are the buffer that enforces the law within the corporate hierarchy. They're often the only thing standing between an employee and an abusive manager.
You call it guardianship. I call it liability management. This is the core tension. HR ensures compliance, yes, but why? Is it because the company has a deep moral soul, or is it because a violation of the Equal Employment Opportunity Act could cost the firm millions in a lawsuit?
Does the motivation matter if the outcome is protection for the employee? If the system forces the company to behave ethically just to save money, the employee still benefits.
It matters when the interests diverge. If there's a harassment claim, HR steps in, but their primary client is the firm, not the victim. They manage the risk. And look at the broader structural role regarding unions. There's a concept called the substitution hypothesis.
I'm familiar with it. It's the idea that HR replaces the need for unions.
Exactly. As private sector union membership plummeted in the U.S., dropping significantly in the late 20th century, HR departments exploded in size and influence. That's not a coincidence. HR became the substitute for collective bargaining. They managed the relationship to keep it individual. They offered just enough grievance resolution to make a union seem unnecessary, effectively declawing the workforce.
They atomize the employees, so they can't negotiate collectively.
I'd argue the causality is backwards there. The rise of sophisticated HR made the blunt instrument of old-school unionism less necessary, especially for knowledge workers. In the 50s and 60s, companies realized that one-size-fits-all contracts just didn't work for talent development. They needed coaching, they needed succession planning. You can't negotiate individual career growth through a collective bargaining agreement. HR stepped in to treat people as individuals, not just as labor. It allowed for meritocracy rather than just seniority.
And yet, despite all this individual focus and meritocracy, the cultural perception of HR isn't career coach, it's police officer.
Oh, pop culture exaggerates for effect. It's low-hanging fruit.
But caricatures reveal truth, don't they? Look at Toby Flenderson from the US version of The Office. He is the archetype. He's a nice guy, mild-mannered, but he is portrayed as a soul-sucking nag. Why? Because his structural role is to stop the fun, because fun is a liability risk. He represents no. He represents the corporate dampener on human spontaneity.
Toby is a comedy bit about administrative burden. He's not an indictment of the entire field.
Then take a darker example, Up in the Air, George Clooney's character. There, we see HR as a purely data-driven function where people are reduced to metrics to be downsized when the math doesn't work. That film captures the terrifying reality of at-will employment managed by professionals who are experts in decoupling people from their livelihoods. The strategic partner there isn't partnering with the employee. They are partnering with the balance sheet.
And that brings us to the modern era. And I think this is where the control argument really loses steam against the reality of efficiency and opportunity. You're talking about downsizing, but let's talk about access. Technology has transformed HRM into a mechanism of empowerment.
Technology usually empowers the system, not the individual.
Not in this case. Look at e-recruiting. 20 years ago, if you wanted a job, you were limited by geography and who you knew. It was an old boys club. Now, HR platforms connect talent to opportunities globally. It democratizes the job market. And once you're in, we have virtual management and human resources information systems, or HRIS.
Which are essentially surveillance tools.
No, they're flexibility tools. You can't have remote work without these systems. You can't have a digital nomad lifestyle without an HR infrastructure that handles virtual onboarding, digital payroll, performance tracking across time zones. These systems allow HR to predict turnover risk, not to fire people, but to intervene and retain them. It allows companies to say, hey, John is at risk of burning out. Let's adjust his load. That is efficiency serving the human need.
I see. Digital Taylorism. We are right back to the stopwatch, but now the stopwatch is a keystroke logger. We're analyzing sentiment in Slack messages. And regarding these systems, we have to talk about algorithmic bias.
Bias is a human problem that code can inherit, sure, but we can fix code. It is often easier to fix an algorithm than to fix a biased manager's heart.
It's harder than that, though. If you feed an algorithm 10 years of hiring data from a firm that subconsciously preferred white men, the algorithm learns that white male equals good candidate. It automates discrimination at a scale no human could ever match. But beyond bias, there's a question of validity. There was a systematic review, a major meta-analysis, that found the effect size of HRM decreases when you correct for past performance.
Okay, break that down. What does that actually mean for the listener?
It means HR often takes credit for talent that was already there. They hire high performers. Those people continue to perform high, and HR says, look at our brilliant management strategy. But the data suggests that the management added very little. The talent was the variable. It suggests this whole strategic partner narrative is a lot of smoke and mirrors to justify a large administrative overhead. They are riding the coattails of the employees they claim to manage.
But that ignores the concept of human capital. You can have raw talent, that's potential. But human capital is talent plus investment. It's knowledge, it's training, it's the network. We distinguish between human resources and human capital for a reason. Capital implies an asset you grow. It implies that the knowledge individuals embody is something we nurture.
And that word, capital, is exactly my point. It is the ultimate commodification. In finance, capital is an asset you own.
When an asset becomes too expensive to maintain or when it depreciates, you liquidate it. When you use the term human capital, you are explicitly stating that people are items on a balance sheet. And with the rise of HR analytics, we are getting dangerously close to a world where employment is decided by a black box algorithm that determines your depreciation rate.
But we must measure to improve. If we don't have the data, we're operating on gut feeling and nepotism. The data allows us to be objective.
Data is never neutral. It's a tool of the institution. And when you treat people as data points, you lose the nuance of the human condition.
I want to summarize my position here, because I think we're circling a fundamental reality. Organizations are collections of people. You cannot just wish away the complexity of thousands of people trying to work together. Without the structure of HRM, without staffing, training, conflict resolution, ethics compliance, organizations fail. And when organizations fail, people lose their livelihoods. Chaos is not a pro-human state. The goal of HR, as articulated by experts like Dave Ulrich, is to align strategy with people. Yes, it serves the business, but it ensures the organization achieves success through people, not in spite of them. It fosters development, it protects rights through compliance, and it builds culture.
That's the ideal. And I don't doubt the good intentions of many HR professionals. But the reality is structural. My position remains that despite the ethical codes and the strategic rebranding, HR serves the employer's strategic objectives first, last, and always. The history, I think, stretches back to the control of Taylorism and the bureaucracy of state management like the org bureau. It acts as a buffer against collective power by substituting for unions. And my fear is that as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, we are perfecting the resource management, the analytics, the surveillance, the efficiency, while forgetting the human.
It's a discipline that is continuously evolving. We aren't in the 1920s anymore, and we certainly aren't in the Soviet Union.
And the question listeners should ask themselves when they walk into work tomorrow is this: does this department view me as a partner to be developed or a risk to be managed?
A complex question for a complex field. And we leave it to you to decide. Can a department designed to manage resources ever fully honor the human?
Or is that tension simply the price of doing business?
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
Goodbye.